TRS School. So it's Miss Kazuku here. Sorry, you just caught me doing a bit of reading, one of my most favourite things to do. So you may or you may not know that this Thursday, the 4th of March, is World Book Day. And it is one of my most favourite days of the year because it celebrates everything to do with books. And I've spoken to you guys many times about how important books are, why they're important, why you should read them. And English have been setting you lots of reading for pleasure homework to really encourage you to do that when you're at home, even during the lockdown. But what you might not know about me is that I love a TV show called The Masked Singer. It's one of my favourite shows and it's over now, which makes me really, really sad. So I was thinking about how we could celebrate World Book Day as a school, and I kind of came up with something a little bit wild. So what TRS is going to be doing is this year engaging in something called the Masked Reader. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce some members of staff, members of the school team who have disguised themselves cunningly, and they will be reading an extract from one of their favourite books to you. What you have to do is try to guess who these teachers are, and we're going to be posting the videos on the library Instagram page for you to be able to put your comments and your guesses on. So follow the library at TRS_library for a chance to engage with our librarians, to see if your guesses are accurate, and to win a few prizes if you manage to guess correctly. So without further ado, let me introduce TRS's The Masked Reader.
A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was right on her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to drift off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room on her face. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well was completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked, like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road she could see Mrs. Rance's shop, where she bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic, but it didn't look real. Suddenly she froze. There was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black. Something tall and black. Something very tall, very black, and very thin.
"10:05. They've gone now, and I'm alone at last. I have the whole night ahead of me, and I won't waste a single moment of it. I shan't sleep it away. I won't dream it away either. I mustn't, because every moment of it will be far too precious. I want to try and remember everything, just as it was, just as it happened. I've had nearly 18 years of yesterdays and tomorrows, and tonight I must remember as many of them as I can. I want tonight to be long as my life, not filled with fleeting dreams that rush me towards dawn. Tonight, more than any other night of my life, I want to feel alive. Charlie is taking me by the hand, leading me because he knows I don't want to go. I've never worn a collar before and it's choking me. My boots are strange and heavy on my feet. My heart is heavy too, because I dread what I am going to. Charlie has told me often how terrible this school place is, about Mr. Munnings and his raging tempers and the long whipping cane he hangs on the wall above his desk. Big Joe doesn't have to go to school, and I don't think that's fair at all. He's much older than me. He's even older than Charlie, and he's never been to school.
G'day there. My first impulse is to scramble from the tree, but I'm belted in. Somehow my fumbling fingers release the buckle and I fall to the ground in a heap, still snarled in my sleeping bag. There's no time for any packing. Fortunately, my backpack and my water bottle are already in the bag. I shove in the belt, hoist the bag over my shoulder and flee. The world's transformed into one of flame and smoke. Burning branches crackle from the trees and fall in showers of sparks at my feet. All I can do is follow the others, the rabbits and the deer. And I even spot a wild dog pack shooting through the woods. I trust their sense of direction because their instincts are sharper than mine, but they are much faster, flying through the underbush so gracefully as my boots catch on the roots and fallen tree limbs. There's no way I can keep a pace with them. The heat is horrible, but worse than the heat is the smoke, which threatens to suffocate me at any moment. I pull the top of my shirt up over my nose, grateful to find it soaked in sweat and it offers a thin veil of protection. And I run, choking, my bag banging against my back and my face cut with branches that materialise from the grey haze without warning, because I know I'm supposed to run.
The Twits by Roald Dahl. Hairy faces. What a lot of hairy-faced men there are around nowadays. When a man grows hair all over his face, it is impossible to tell what he really looks like. Perhaps that's why he does it. He'd rather you didn't know. Then there's the problem of washing. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be as big a job as when you and I wash the hair on our heads. So what do I want to know is, how often do all these hairy-faced men wash their faces? Is it only once a week, like us, on a Sunday night? And do they shampoo it? Do they use a hairdryer? Do they rub hair tonic in to stop their faces from going bald? Do they go to the barber to have their hairy faces cut and trimmed? Or do they do it themselves in front of the bathroom mirror with nail scissors?
Jordan College was the grandest and richest of all the colleges in Oxford. It was probably the largest too, though no one knew for certain. The buildings, which were grouped around three irregular quadrangles, dated from every period from the early Middle Ages to the mid-18th century. It had never been planned, it had grown piecemeal, with past and present overlapping at every spot, and the final effect was one of jumbled and squalid grandeur. Some part was always about to fall down, and for 5 generations the same family, the Parslows, had been employed full-time by the college as masons and scaffolders. The present Mr. Parslow was teaching his son the craft. The 2 of them and their 3 workmen would scramble like industrious termites over the scaffolding they'd erected at the corner of the library, or over the roofs of the chapel, and haul up bright new blocks of stone or rolls of shiny lead or bolts of timber. The college owned farms and estates all over Britain. It was said that you could walk from Oxford to Bristol in one direction and to London in the other, and never leave Jordan land. In every part of the kingdom there were dye works and brick kilns, forest and Adamcraft works that paid rent to Jordan, and every quarter day of the bursar and his clerks would tot it all up, announce the total of the Colosseum, and order a pair of swans for the feast. Some of the money was put by for reinvestment. Colosseum had just approved the purchase of an office block in Manchester, and the rest was used to pay the scholars' modish stipends and the wages of the servants, and the Parslows and the dozen or so families of craftsmen and traders who served the college, to keep the wine cellar richly filled to buy books and bookgraphs for the immense library that filled one side of the Melrose quadrangle and extended, burrow-like, for several floors beneath the ground, and not least to buy the latest philosophical apparatus to equip the chapel. It was important to keep the chapel up to date because Jordan College had no rival, either in Europe or in New France, as a centre of experimental theology. Lyra knew that much, at least. She was proud of her college's eminence, and liked to boast of it to the various urchins and ragamuffins she played with by the canal or the clay beds. And she regarded visiting scholars and eminent professors from elsewhere with pitying scorn, because they didn't belong to Jordan, and so must know less, poor things, than the humblest of Jordan's under-scholars.
Hi everyone, today we are going to be reading Sabriel by Garth Nix. Prologue. It was little more than 3 miles from the wall into the Old Kingdom, but that was enough. Noonday sunshine could be seen on the other side of the wall in Ansel Stair, and not a cloud in sight. Here there was a clouded sunset, and a steady rain had just begun to fall, coming faster than the tents could be raised. The midwife shrugged her cloak higher up against her neck, and bent down over the woman again, raindrops spilling from her nose onto the upturned face below. The midwife's breath blew out in a cloud of white, but there was no answering billow of air from her patient. The midwife sighed and slowly straightened up, that single movement telling the watchers everything they needed to know. The woman who had staggered into their forest camp was dead, only holding on to life long enough to pass it to the baby at her side. But even as the midwife picked up the pathetically small form beside the dead woman, it shuddered within its wrappings and was still.
Diet tips. Staying busy will help take your mind off food, especially when you first start. Get up and do something. Exercise helps, even if it's going for a walk. Keep a food diary. Writing down what you eat helps you track your calorie consumption. And you can also log how you are feeling, including energy, sleep, weight loss and fluid intake. It's great to reflect and see how you are doing. Decide when the best time to fast is. Avoiding social get-togethers, holidays and weekends will help you kickstart your plan. On non-fasting days, don't binge and don't overdo the portions. Avoid refined carbohydrates and sugars. You can fill up on high-volume foods like broccoli, cauliflower, carrots and heaps of lettuce or spinach without adding large amounts of calories. At mealtimes, replace starchy carbohydrates with lots of veggies and you'll feel less sluggish and hungry. Schedule in easy meals. Plan in advance so you avoid temptation. That way you can also avoid missing a meal. Drink plenty of water. You may experience headaches in the first couple of days as your body adjusts. Relax and drink water. Remember, you need extra fluid as your body burns off fat. Prepare some tasty meals and snacks for the fridge or freezer and plan ahead so you aren't tempted to overdo the calories. Finding a diet buddy is not only good for morale, but you can also swap ideas, recipes and provide encouragement. Experiment. You're bound to find your own staples which are handy and quick to prepare.
Twits by Roald Dahl. Hairy faces. What a lot of hairy-faced men there are around nowadays. When a man grows hair all over his face, it is impossible to tell what he really looks like. Perhaps that's why he does it. He'd rather you didn't know. Then there's the problem of washing. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be as big a job as when you and I wash the hair on our heads. So what I want to know is this. How often do all these hairy-faced men wash their faces? Is it only once a week, like us, on Sunday nights? And do they shampoo it? Do they use a hairdryer? Do they rub hair tonic in to stop their faces from going bald? Do they go to a barber to have their hairy faces cut and trimmed? Or do they do it themselves, in front of the bathroom mirror with nail scissors? I don't know. But next time you see a man with a hairy face, which will probably be soon as you step out on the street maybe you'll look at him more closely and start wondering about some of these things.